The structural requirements of the standard are given here. They are in Clause 5. The biggest difference from Clause 5 to the previous version of the standard is that Clause 5 now amalgamates information that was given in the first parts of Clause 4 of the previous version. There are not many real changes, and all it really is a reorganization of the same requirements. Now let's look at the scope of lab operations. In order to better understand the requirements for a lab, we should understand what a lab normally does, what its normal processes are. In order not to make this up, we understand that the laboratory establishes a contact with the client. It could even be their parent company. A sample is received or sample is acquired. Process control takes place to ensure that the sample is deemed fit for testing, and then testing is undertaken. Quality assurance starts the moment testing is undertaken. Quality control ends the minute testing is completed. Quality assurance continues with the data until the report is released, and from there on, the laboratory is involved in post-testing or post-sales work, such as feedback. All of this is underpinned by a good quality system, but the laboratory scope of operations should be well understood when we're trying to implement 17025. Note in this slide where quality assurance and quality control take place. In terms of 5.3, the structural requirements of the standard, the lab is now required to state what it does and identify those competencies that it wishes to have on its scope of accreditation. This is a bit more prescriptive than was in the previous version of the standard. The lab didn't really have to do this, but now the lab is required by the standard to tell itself and the world what it is competent to do. Whether or not such a thing ends up on the scope will determine whether or not it has actually demonstrated such competence. In terms of who is doing what in the laboratory, the quality manager and the technical manager are no longer mentioned as they were in the previous version of the standard, but their functions are mentioned. So the laboratory is expected to fill these functions, but we don't tell them how. The standard doesn't tell them how. And that brings us to the end of the first part.